Welcome to the 15th episode of All Things Crypto, an Elk.Finance podcast. I'm Shylo, also known as LtSnakePlissken, and today we're discussing DAOs, DAOs. I've got a special guest here, Denton, from Who Smart Chain. Yeah, go
Great.
ahead and...
It's great to be here, Snake. I'm Denton from Who Smart Chain, and I look after the community over there. You might have seen me active on the crypto Twitter, as well as the social media channels. But we've looks like I got introduced to you through a mutual friend, DoubleClick, and very
Yeah,
happy to be here today to talk about DAOs with you.
yeah, absolutely. And it's worth mentioning, who was the first exchange we actually listed on. And,
Really?
yeah. So, and it's pretty cool being on the chain. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's great to have you guys as partners as well.
Absolutely. So we want to make sure we mention that we're not financial advisors, and
Nope.
whatever we say here, no, not at all, and it's not financial advice. So you're better off asking Bob down the street, to to do that, or even better, find a licensed advisor. So without further ado, I think we could maybe get into talking about DAOs. First of all,
Sure.
yeah, what from your perspective, Denton, what is a DAO?
A DAO is basically a group of people who's gotten together with some kind of common goal, connected by the internet, and probably using the blockchain as a substrate to get things done,
Yeah,
do governance, manage money, like their treasury, and then now we're talking about sub DAOs and DAOs interacting with each other. So we've come a long way since when it just started.
yeah, like DAOs on top of DAOs on top of DAOs,
Yeah.
and before we get carried away, DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So really, the most decentralized kind of platform for people who hold assets, and generally crypto, to
Yeah.
be to be some decision makers and have control of a pot of assets, and it also involves some governance of whether
Yeah.
within their own ecosystem, as well as holding tokens in their treasury that may allow them to make a big difference in other projects and protocols too, right?
Yeah, for sure. We've seen this happen in the ecosystem where DAOs kind of just like piggyback on top of each other. Um, and then we can see like for certain protocols, there are ways to like accrue value, I don't know, through DeFi or some other aspect. But then we have DAOs that start to kind of game it, kind of gamify it. And
Yeah.
then the decision making process of these organizations are really interesting because it involves a lot of different parties, a lot of way of talking about and then making those decisions. So it's really interesting, and people are kind of like spread across in a decentralized manner. Um, and so, yeah, things get kind of crazy when DAOs start to talk like a stack on top of each other, I guess.
Absolutely, and it could get kind of like infinitely complex. Like I'm kind of like you're looking in a mirror, but there's also a mirror behind you, or
Yeah.
something freezes in Windows and you drag it around the screen.
The blue screen of death.
That's
Yes.
right. Yeah. And yeah, DAOs are interesting because they it's a new way to make decisions in a manner based on usually like how many people are invested in the DAO and how much share they have, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's something we've kind of seen happening with lots of like protocol DAOs. Protocol DAOs are things that we usually see quite often in the DeFi space, like Uniswap and Curve and things like that. So
Yeah.
they're DAOs that govern the DeFi protocol and make decisions on how that should operate.
Right.
Things like, what kind of trading pairs to put in, what platforms they should get on, and then this is kind of like the crux of what they do is how the protocol should run. So how they design the protocol, like
Right.
certain economic and tokenomic incentives, like whether those should be changed or adjusted to suit the community's needs, or even to do some combination with other projects. So yeah, those are the decisions that the community has to come together and then talk about it and discuss it, and then disseminate the information, and then okay, have some arguments or not, and then and then if they come to this a collective decision, then the guys will be okay. This decision has legitimacy. It's come from the people that own the protocol with a stake in it, and then they can go ahead and do that. And then that decision, everybody accepts it. And then no matter what happens, they come back and they talk about it, and they go through that process again. So it's really quite civilized, I'd say. It
Yeah,
could be.
yeah.
It could be.
It could be on
Yeah.
like looking at it from the outside for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's you bring up an interesting point there that often projects start their own DAO, or members of a project start a DAO to make decisions for the project. So everyone gets a vote based on their share, and then that's how they make a decision. Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, so that kind of makes sense. And then you mentioned they often partner with other projects and decide to maybe buy some of their token, or do a trade,
Yeah.
and then they have some influence on a second community. um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's
This
it's
is
really
a
interesting.
this is something we see a lot if with the Curve and Convex setup. Curve is this really influential DeFi project. I'm sure everybody has heard of it in the space. But then Convex basically piggybacks on top of it, and then does things with the Curve governance token. So
Right.
they can
and
influence how Curve operates
and then
through
the
this.
convex is the DAO, right?
Convex is not DAO. They're actually a separate
Oh,
protocol,
they're
but they're
separate
also
project.
yeah, but they're also governed by some sort of DAO.
Oh,
So
okay.
that is quite interesting
Interesting.
in how they stack together. Um, yeah, so they come together, they make these decisions, and then sometimes it can get pretty messy. Like if you're just talking on a forum, uh, messages can get lost. Meanings and context, can not get translated properly.
Hmm.
And the nouns of a certain protocol's operation is not easy to kind of communicate to a wide audience.
Right.
So in the end, DAOs encounter this problem where not many people can actually contribute to this kind of deep and meaningful conversation.
Right.
And as the DAO gets to a certain size, this gets harder and harder. And I guess this is kind of like analogous to the scalability problem that we see
Hmm.
in blockchains.
Yeah.
Yeah, like to reach this kind of consensus within the
Yeah.
blockchain and within this consensus in the community, it's kind of analogous to each other, kind of similar.
Yeah. Yeah, it is similar. And like the DAO grows, and it's like all about who's participating, who has what share to make the decisions. Yeah, and you're right, like things get usually it's run through a forum, and somebody makes a post about a proposal, what they want
Yeah,
done, and it's as clear as possible, but we can't control necessarily who's writing it, and what it looks like. So sometimes there's that breakdown in what it's interpreted to be and what it actually is, based
yeah,
on all of that, which always creates some conflict. And it's everyone's behind a keyboard, and it's surprisingly civil. But people can be pretty, when they're anonymous and behind a keyboard can type a lot of things. So yeah,
yeah. They could certainly. I think a lot of nouns get lost
yeah,
in this kind of communication,
sure,
this forum post style communication. Firstly, the writer has to be on top of the game. Like, if the writing is not concise, or it's just too long, or it never gets to the point, then people will start to. There's this like big barrier
yeah,
to understanding it and then making critical decision on it.
yeah,
So that's one thing. The other thing is who's got time to read through 35 pages of forum
sure.
posts?
So
Like,
totally. And then you've got people like making the decisions who actually read the thing, and they might not represent the majority of the DAO.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Like, just I don't have data for this, but just for a gut feeling, like
Sure.
most of token holders for a DAO, will not be on the phone. Like,
Right.
it's just how it is. Like nobody, not nobody, but the
Very few.
majority of people
Yeah.
will spend their time, on the forum, on the governance section of the forum, reading through these things. So there is a need to kind of disseminate this information, for the token holders to understand this problem in this more digestible way
Mhm.
and communicate this outwards, and then they can reach some kind of decision on it, which is, uh, not the most like independent way of doing it, but it needs to be done nonetheless. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to operate.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so that kind of brings us to the next kind of question. Why are DAOs important?
Ooh, this is kind of big.
Yeah.
First, we have to like think about the way we organize ourselves.
Sure.
Um, like traditional, Web two, not even Web two, but just like a
Traditional
normal
world. Yeah.
in real life
Yeah.
organizations. They're mostly centralized entities. If we think about like the biggest example is the government.
Mhm.
They're centralized. They try to say, okay, we have limits to our power, but maybe not in all cases. And then
Air quotes.
yeah, yeah, and then the other good example we can find is probably universities. Like
Right.
think of how much power they hold, um, generally within the society.
Mhm.
Um, your academic certificates are
Yeah.
this kind of like universally recognized, qualification. They come
Yeah.
from just the university, which is just a institution
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. And even within the universities, there's like this range of
Oh,
legitimacy
yeah.
from, I don't know, Ivy League ones to like community ones, and then to
Mhm.
online colleges now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. University of American Samoa. I'm looking at you.
yeah, that's you could probably maybe buy a certificate. Yeah, and then yeah, you see these kind of organizational problems as things get bigger and bigger. They have this kind of bureaucracy that needs to
Mhm.
sustain it. The interests of what they originally wanted to serve become like this like overridden by the institution itself.
Right.
Once it grows to a critical kind of size, then it becomes like self-serving. It
Right.
doesn't serve what they wanted to do anymore. And then
Right.
I think that the most best example of this is when a company IPOs.
Yeah.
Um, a company is not centralized, but at first it has some sort of vision by the founder.
Oh,
If they
sure.
do, say a good example is Patagonia, um, the clothing brand for like
Hmm.
outdoor apparel. They went IPO before, and then the founder realized that what they wanted to do wasn't achievable in this IPO kind of structure. Yeah, like you can't be accountable to the shareholders every quarter if you want it to be eco-friendly.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it just wasn't possible.
And IPO stands for initial public offering, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
when
Just
when
for.
your company, yeah. After you go IPO, you become beholden to the shareholders by law.
Right.
So just by the courtesy of the game rules,
Mhm.
you can't spend too much money on
Right.
being green. So he bought the company back, um, so he can continue to realize this vision that he has. So he's become from this very centralized thing to less centralized by himself owning the company. But
Right.
what's even more decentralized if all the community and the customers and the user
Right.
base can own the company itself.
I
Like
kind
if
of
you
I kind of picture it as like everyone's in that shareholder meeting, even if you've got, one share, you're technically
Yeah.
allowed to participate in that big board meeting with the proposals, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like anyone, and so the importance kind of comes from it being itself like a new form of government, not only related to crypto and projects, and that's where we're seeing most of it, but it could be anything. It's a way to keep track of votes, value differences, proposals, like a new
Yeah.
way forward for any system. And it all kind of allows the smallest holder to have a weight in their say. So I mean that whole new approach seems to be a lot different than that centralized approach initially. It's
Yeah.
kind of the polar opposite, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think this organizational problem is what really we're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to get the community
Yeah,
and the user base and the people who are actually the ones who are affected by whatever you're doing
yeah,
back into the way of governing it.
right,
So in this way, it gives a lot of legitimacy to a project. Um,
sure,
it
yeah,
it will listen to the user's needs, and
and it
if
has
it's
to,
designed,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, and if it's designed well, then it will benefit these people. So in terms of you mentioned this way of transferring value or managing this kind of value. What happens is it removes that from the central entities
Right.
and it moves those values back into the actual users.
So
So
it's like it's like you're a bank, but everyone who works at the bank is able to decide what we do with the bank's funds.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And to do that, you need a organizational structure.
Right.
But this organizational structure is not the one that we're used to, or
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of like unconsciously fed,
Yeah.
information on how it's supposed to be. This kind of decentralized organizational structure is something that people have to hammer out, have to experiment on. And you mentioned this kind of participation where everybody can have a say. That is certainly a key part to this to DAOs and how they operate. But we've been quite blessed in the space with great minds like
Mm-hmm.
Vitalik and
Yep.
Glenn Wall. So they've been thinking of ways how this can be more fair.
Right.
Um, so sometimes in situations, if everybody gets one vote and you vote by the number of tokens that you have in the protocol, sometimes that's not the fairest way to vote.
Sure.
Um, and that's because if you're a whale and you have
Oh yeah,
lots of
you
capital,
you can own
yeah,
51% and then make
yeah,
the big decisions.
yeah, yeah, and we come back to this point of this 51% attack.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
um, but yeah, they've been thinking of ways to mitigate this. So they're thinking of ways to move beyond voting, just using tokens. Um, and that's kind of really interesting because
Mm-hmm.
in a way that can kind of move back to the real world if it works.
Sure.
So
Like,
yeah, you
yeah,
could experiment new ways of governance in a DAO
like
because
a
it's
weighted based on just being a member and amount of
yeah,
tokens and or amount of participation. You can kind of set it up however you want. It doesn't have to be how much you own.
yeah, yeah. And one really exciting development for this is actually with NFTs
Yeah,
because
sure. Yeah,
NFTs you can program them in ways that are non-transferable,
right.
so they're tied to you, your identity.
Yeah.
And they recently published a paper on this, I think just a few days ago, which is really cool. And it's about this decentralized society.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. I'll send that to you if
That'd be
you're
great. I
interested.
love that stuff. You know, and I think I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
but I mean, I think when we think about an actual country's government regulated by citizens voting in a decentralized way where everyone gets an equal say, something like that on a large scale, I would love to see how that would play out. Just to you know just to see.
Yeah, it's a really interesting experiment that we not experiment, but times that we live in, because
Sure.
in Taiwan, um, they have like really good digital infrastructure as well.
Yeah.
Not just Taiwan, but also Estonia as well. So
Yeah.
these two countries are really ahead of their in terms of their digital kind of rights movement.
Sure.
So they have schemes like this forum participation where they can gauge sentiment uh, of the general society.
Yeah.
So they use this kind of forum that everybody uses. And for example, during the pandemic, they had this way of gauging sentiment, whether to like put on masks or not. Like they
Yeah.
had this question to ask them like whether you think masks are useful or not. Just this really simple question. And then they can use this kind of forum monitoring to kind of see what we should do to react in this critical time in a
Hmm.
pandemic.
Yeah.
So this is something that you can do, and then in terms of the forum or participation, everybody in the society can then participate and make their sentiment known, and then the government will
Yeah.
acting as the government entity will react to
Represent.
these
Yeah.
things, and then get things done based on that. So it becomes bottom up. So
Yeah.
this kind of governance and decision making and idea generation becomes bottom up from the
Yeah.
users themselves.
Which is really flipping everything on its head. Um, and
Yeah.
we look at it DAOs from like a legal point of view. Now, um, I guess like are DAOs legal entities?
Um, this is kind of uh, as you know, the legal stuff usually lags
Yeah.
behind the
Sure.
technological stuff.
Constantly. Yeah.
So I think it will be a while before legally it's recognized.
Yeah.
But there's some progress made, like in
Yeah.
Wyoming, I think.
Wyoming. Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say there you
yeah,
can incorporate a DAO
yeah, yeah.
legally recognized.
There's been some criticism to the law in the statute that legalizes DAO in the state,
Mhm.
and I think they have these DAOs that are looking after cities now, like city infrastructure. I don't
Yeah.
know. There's this one called City DAO, and then they're trying to like make decision based on the land that they have and what to do with that. So that's quite interesting. I don't
That's
think
cool.
it has to. mm, how should I say? DAOs will probably be legal in future, just
Oh,
because a
sure.
lot of our value accrual and assets and things like that are moving to the digital space.
Sure.
Wait till we have like deeds and
Oh, mortgages
to
and
houses and
yeah,
mortgages on
agreements.
NFTs.
Yeah, wills.
Yeah,
Yeah,
then it'll have to be legal. Like,
for sure. Well, I mean,
um,
yeah, totally. And you can think of the endless possibilities where a DAO could be something meaningful. Like you could use a DAO to foster an ecosystem, and that ecosystem could be a specific project. It could be like a physical location. Like imagine a DAO in a city that fosters the development of crypto and technology related technology.
yeah,
Or anything like a university, an institution. You could have like charitable organizations that set up DAOs, not for profits,
yeah, for sure.
that do stuff. So it's kind of endless. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think at this stage we're quite kind of honed in on this
Yeah,
kind of protocol DAO
yeah,
way of understanding it. But a company can be anything. A group of people with some money can do
can do
anything they
anything.
like.
Sure.
So that's the way we should look at DAOs. And then to make this decentralized and scale, like if your vision is really big, like for example, I wanted to make, I don't know, riding your bike, cheaper than driving a car. And then I
Yeah,
make a DAO and design economic incentives to do that. Okay, how do that? And then once it gets to a certain size, then I need people to be organized in the way that makes that happen, like group
yeah, yeah.
marketing things like that. So so yeah, like I can have this crazy idea, I can make a DAO.
Yeah,
Whether
sure.
it works or not is a separate question,
That's
but
true. And it all depends on design and forethought and how it's
yeah,
organized. For
yeah,
sure.
and that's the interesting part. That's the way we design the way to organize ourselves. And then with the when the crypto comes in, that's the way we design how to incentivize people's actions. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
that's
it's kind of,
combining the two things.
yeah, it's totally pretty neat, the endless possibilities. And you know, there is no textbook written about, ooh, how to start your own DAO. It's that new, right? Like it's something that's just beginning to be talked about and tried, but it's not big yet. But that kind of brings us to the next thought. Um, what are some problems with DAOs as a whole, or potential problems that occur?
Yeah, I think we've had this kind of first wave or second wave of DAOs in the
Yeah,
industry now, and people have started to kind of look at this problem more in depth.
right.
One person that I really look up to in this space is this lady called Simona Pop.
Hmm.
So she heads some of the Gitcoin community building
Yeah,
initiatives, and then she is really like into tackling this problem
yeah,
of like
yeah.
DAO participation. So
Yeah,
one thing is a lot of token holders to the DAO. As we mentioned before, they don't look at the forum, so they
right.
just don't have time
No,
and mental space to think about these very nuanced arguments on how the
sure.
protocol should run.
Yeah.
Um, so this is what they call a participation fatigue.
Mm.
You can get really like you have this period where you're really into it, you're really
And then you're like,
active.
man, I don't want to
Oh
play
man,
guitar anymore. You
yeah,
know,
it's like
I give up.
I don't want to practice. I just want to play good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, and then what happens is people start to kind of like space out, okay, and then the making process becomes centralized back to
Hmm.
the few people again.
Yeah.
And then it takes effort to decentralize,
Hmm. Yeah.
and
Everyone's got to do a thing, and
yeah,
it's hard when you've got to, like, oh, just do it. Oh, everyone do your share. It's hard to get that sentiment ingrained in a population.
yeah,
You know, look at people voting. Unless there's something very tumultuous going on, voter turnout is probably lower and lower in countries where there isn't anything, you know, particularly meaningful going on, especially.
yeah, yeah, and I think that really comes down to this kind of like a intrinsic motivation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you have a stake in something, and if it
Yeah.
really affects you, then you'll be sure to participate in the vote and understand the issue, and spend time on it.
Right.
That's because it affects you, like your bottom line. And if it doesn't, for example, if it's a protocol, whether the token issuance should be up by 0.5%, then maybe you won't spend much time doing that. You've
Right.
got other things that are higher
Yeah.
up in the priority list. So
So you need that almost like external motivation, and also the intrinsic passion for it as well. You need to, and not only that, with intrinsic motivation and looking at some of that research, which I come from the therapy world,
okay, that's
from
great.
before I got into crypto. So it's weird how often they mesh. But like when you try to use positive reinforcement, like getting something,
Yeah,
and you try to train in intrinsic motivation, it's actually not always that successful. Um,
yeah, it's
People,
hard.
yeah, the more you give them, sometimes instead they want more, and then they actually stop being intrinsically motivated by it. Um, but we'll see, like, if somebody's really passionate about something and they're focused on it, like, they really have these DAO interests at heart and they just believe in it, that those are the users we'll see interacting more, I assume, given the previous research.
Yeah, yeah. I think that even if decentralization comes in with certain degrees. You could say a DAO is decentralized, but actually, the people who are making the protocol or meaningful
Contribution.
proposals or
Yeah.
suggestions or contributions, it often doesn't exceed like 100 people,
Yeah,
um, even in the biggest DAOs.
that's true.
Yeah,
And I think another piece that ends up happening is when DAOs are often quite slow to make decisions. Proposals got to be up for X amount of time. You got to maybe
yeah,
revise it. People have feedback, blah, 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 blah. And by the time the decision's made, it's possible that the opportunity that they were voting on might not be available anymore.
yeah, yeah. That's true. That's for sure. And then they have different, um, what do they call it? Like
Yeah,
steps they have to go through
yeah,
before a proposal can pass.
exactly. Yeah,
So yeah, but it's I don't think that really it can be designed in a way that to react faster.
hmm
Um, if
yeah,
there's like a council member or some kind of like emergency group of decision makers, if the DAO
yeah,
agrees to that, and they in times of crisis, these people will step in and make the decision on behalf of the community, and they're
sure.
okay with it, then that's okay.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah,
And that brings you back to like how well organized your DAO is and what your structure is. And if you can find an efficient enough structure that addresses those concerns,
yep,
then what you're saying, you're probably going to have a more effective DAO with higher participation that kind of gets past some of those initial foibles, those missteps that people
yeah,
make.
yeah, 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 yeah. So that's a really nice kind of design space.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can take a look. I think the big direction is probably will require a slower kind of
Yeah.
time frame of deliberation by the community and
Sure.
the core participants. In times of emergency, that has to just take a little a back step, and then the people who can react fast and have this small group of people make the
Mhm.
decision that will probably come in,
Yeah.
uh, because that's the only way to be able to manage this kind of crisis situation if they're in one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. And like I think that brings us to like what the future could look like for DAOs, right? Like we already talked a little bit about like what if like what if you had a country or not for profit and like all of these things that could be a DAO. Like where do you see it going?
yeah. I'm really excited for this actually, and
Yeah.
how DAOs can evolve. I think it can really be a way for us to organize in a new and better way than the one we currently have, and that will empower a lot of people
Yeah.
through participation, through organizing themselves in ways that are more meaningful
Yeah.
and give value back to them. So one thing I'm very, very excited about is how DAOs are coming together to tackle problems that we face.
Yeah.
Uh, Things like tackling climate change.
I was just
Uh,
gonna say that. Yeah.
yeah, or regenerative aspects of their economics,
Sure.
things that are not just like predatory and sucking
Yeah.
money out of the bottom and then moving them up into the social economic
Yeah.
ladder.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I think KlimaDAO is one of the ones that I really pay attention to.
Sure.
Uh, they do some like crazy carbon credit, you know, backing some really cool economics to incentivize that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
think
they
that's
they just have a really slick website, and I'm just a sucker for that.
Oh no, honestly though, I mean, something easy to use is
Yeah,
and that goes to be the same with DAOs. Like what interface they've got, defines how useful they can be. Like all those little things play into what they're gonna be and what like who can use them. Like grandma's got to be able to use the DAO. If she wants to participate right in the future. So
yeah.
you know,
Like imagine if you had a DAO that was so slick
yeah.
that your grandma or your parents could participate in a meaningful way in the
Yeah.
DAO. That would be pretty cool.
I think my father-in-law would have it on lockdown because he's always in the comment section on the Globe and Mail, just like blaming people. No, not really, but um, he's so like I think if you could equivocate it that way, I think that's really possible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think this way of participating in governance is something really people will get more used to.
Yeah.
Uh, Sometimes I think maybe we're not used to making decisions all the time,
Yeah, sure.
and
We get
people,
yeah.
yeah, just kind of rely on this other entity to tell us what to do.
We get lazy.
Um, yeah, we just don't have the mind space to do that, I guess, because there's so
Yeah.
much, stuff happening. But then, with DAOs, I think we can, get that kind of mentality and practice decision making back
Mhm.
to people, and that's really important for them to, be better and more not function. I wouldn't say functional, but
Well,
to
it's a
be more
different
like
yeah.
autonomous.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, and the
yeah,
funny thing is since we haven't had the tools to do something like this prior to, I would say, like, the internet at least, but probably like a fair way, the blockchain. Like,
yeah.
it's truly the tools that allow us to do this, where we wouldn't have, we couldn't mail out everyone a letter about a proposal, and then check it out and mail it
Yeah,
back.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not the same. It was a more secure kind of way to vote on an issue that pertains to you, and I think they popped up because it's easier. We're capable. We've got the tool.
for sure. I think this tool of transferring value in this secure way,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, which we haven't really explored, is designing rules to how that's played,
Oh
how
man,
that value is transferred.
that
That
could
will
that could be a
really
whole
be.
episode on its own, right?
Yeah, yeah, that would be like all the tokenomics, and then I think even just like the psychology behind some of these things
Oh
would be
yeah,
really cool. Um,
it is neat.
so I think it's a very exciting time that we're in. Sometimes I feel like I'm just like free riding on all these on
Oh
these
yeah,
great ideas, but
yeah,
that's okay. I think they're moving really fast, and
yeah.
we need to keep up.
It's true. It's so hard, and I always feel sorry for our devs, and I do like the smallest amount of dev work possible. Like I'm like, you know, so I don't really know how to code very well or any like, but like they get so many ideas thrown at them. Hey, can you do this thing or this thing or this thing? And it's so awesome. But we need that to push it forward. Like we need to figure out the correct infrastructure for a DAO, to make it the most successful, give the highest chance of success.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes I think expending that energy and effort is
Yeah.
kind of like the way we can move forward on these issues.
And then when we see DAOs fail, we figure out what went wrong, and it's like standing on the shoulders of giants, right? I mean, using the previous research and in an open source environment where all those contracts are out there, on the blockchain, you can
Yeah,
see them, you can use them, you can build it, you can accelerate the progress, and we can see experimentation on a level that's much quicker, more accessible, and easier to do than traditional government and other systems, because it's there, and we can look at it and we can see stuff go down in flames like that.
yeah,
So we can see things fail, and then we can learn right away, whereas if it was a traditional system, it would take forever to fall apart, and we're seeing a revolution and all these things, and it's like, oh, maybe not that, but we can see it happen so quick that
yeah.
maybe it's advantageous.
Absolutely. That kind of fast iteration is
Yeah,
really cool. And I think having all of them open source is important as well.
I
This
agree.
kind of openness and public transparency to
Yeah,
how things are done. That's really important as well.
accountability, right? You need to see
Yeah,
see who's voting what, see who has what allocation, and it being completely accessible and open on the ledger,
yeah,
which again we wouldn't have been able to have before,
yeah.
for sure. So cool. Well, that was a really awesome conversation about DAOs,
No worries.
and I really just enjoyed chatting about it with you, Denton.
No worries. I really enjoyed it as well. I think we probably, can talk about this much
Forever.
longer than the time slot allows us to. So
Yeah.
maybe next time we can continue on the topic and see what new developments there are.
Absolutely. I think it'd be great, and even to chat about something else, or yeah, even dive into something specific about DAOs. Would love to have you back, and thanks for being my first online guest who is not here in person. So
Thank you, thank you.
yeah,
More and more decentralized.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Right? We're decentralizing the podcast.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's great.
All
Cool.
right.
I'd love to be back on. So thanks for having me today. It was really, really a great conversation with you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And if you have any feedback for us, please reach out on Telegram, or this is usually the easiest way to get a hold of me. You can
Great.
message me in the Elk chat. That's t.me/elk_finance_chat. And you can tag Denton there too, of course, about this episode. And yeah,
Great.
we appreciate all you guys listening. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.